Used to running around.
You had a chance to catch your breath?
Yeah,
You okay?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so they're ready. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, well, thank you for coming tonight. We're going to continue our review. This is our third meeting of the Battery Energy Storage Steering Committee. So we'll continue looking at our special exception standards, and we wanted to provide a forum for community input. And our planning department, Janice Shear and Seth Race, have done a great job of putting up, these visuals that they'll talk us through. And we can see how our thoughts fit into the zoning patterns and what options are available. So Janice or Seth, would you
today
like to talk us through?
we wanted to highlight where we started and where we have arrived. We started with all of the zones where BESS utility scale were permissible. During the first meeting, we discussed that we were going to rule out residential, and then we had certain zones that were left over. We wanted then to look at size, and we decided that 1 acre would be an adequate size for a BESS at a utility scale. Again, I won't keep saying utility scale. That is the focus, though.
When you say utility scale, you mean 1 mega. We last also spoke about
Absolutely.
starting at 1 megawatt, just so the units of measurement are not confusing.
I think that is something we certainly want to move forward with. It's so much easier for us all to understand 1 megawatt as opposed to getting into the kilowatts.
Wait, Seth, could you go back one screen? So what we talked about before was limiting it to industrial and then
Highway office, highway business, office OD, and village business, LI 40, LI 200.
Well,
so that's
right.
about 8 zones.
That was what was left. We didn't say we were putting it there. That's what's left after we remove residential.
Right, so we're gonna try to go from high level and then drill
Yeah,
down
exactly.
to a parcel level.
So the first one
From the first-
showed, the
Nice
first
one.
screen showed,
Go back to
All
the
the
first screen if you
residential.
would.
Yeah,
map,
so
just
I'm
I,
gonna slow it down.
I
a
only
little.
booted today's presentation, I'm afraid.
Oh, okay, all right.
I
Well,
could
you can go to
search
map,
for
do you have map 2, that one?
it.
with the
Right
stripes?
there, I do.
Oh, okay.
I don't have it
So
digitally.
those stripes represent all the residentially zones, so that would just be off. Then map 3 there, which is also on the screen, right? Or was,
Sorry.
is the, what's left. Then as you move closer in, then we sort of did a aerial of those parcels as you go down and you see them. And then we started putting in the recommendations of the buffers, et cetera, the, things that are starting to come out of the task force of the governor, the off-gassing or the sort of cone of, area that you should be set back. And so
But
that's
the
still up for
second-
discussion. Are we talking about 300 feet, 500 feet, 700 feet? Like what's around there? If there's residential, do we just say, well, not this one because there's still this over here? So that's what this forum is all about, to have Post-its and have these conversations about what's left. And so in the end, are we ending up with 1 parcel? Is there gonna be 3? How many will be left for someone to be able to potentially do this if that's something that the board still wants them to do?
But it looks as though the second display board is everything but the residential, but the third one is only where the substation,
Transmission
This
line.
transmission
Right.
lines are, right?
Because we did do that, because we felt like if it's going to be technologically infeasible, why are we even talking about it?
But we're not gonna eliminate that. I mean, if somebody did wanna go in and pay for it, but they'd still be restricted by the 300 feet away from a residence or school or.
Right, but like, if it's not even on a distribution line, and we'll get input from LIPA on this, I think, the next time around, but if it's going to cost you $5 million to put it in, and you're only allowed to put a small, like, it may not just be worth it. So let's just talk about like what's really possible instead of just
So
theoretically
where we
possible.
drilled down to on proximity to transmission and distribution lines, with the exception of one in Remsenburg, Spionk, they are all in Hampton Bays.
Is it all in Hampton Bays?
Quite,
All of
if,
it.
if
Yeah,
you pull
basically.
up the hosting map,
Yep.
yes.
It's comical, but it's not. It's not funny. I'm just saying that's only because of the distribution lines. But what about the sand
Absolutely.
mines and the bridge?
Certainly, we can get into the sand mines. Today,
Okay.
we were just going to dive
thought-
into
yeah.
transmission lines. They're going to be,
I think-
in all likelihood,
Yeah.
where
I
the
thought we
first utility scale.
I think
BESS
that's
would
the
be.
value of adding, not restricting it, or not us restricting it based on transmission lines, and let the developer say, it's not of value to me
Yeah.
to do this,
That
you
was
know?
my point.
So
Right.
that
Let's
would
not
be
us
back
limit
to
it.
that
Yeah.
map 3. And that had a fairly equal distribution across the town. So
Yes.
map 3 shows, you see it in the west, you see it in Hampton Bays, but you also see it on the east end, east of the canal. So that was the map we last saw
That was from
together
last
as a
time.
committee.
Mhm.
And then, since then, we got access to the hosting capacity maps from LIPA, which you need to register. We can't make those available because there's like homeland security issues and things like that. So we had to register, and we can only kind of do that as a high-level analysis. We can't say these are the exact spots from LIPA. So,
But it could very well be that that a lot of the ones that are on that second map that we're calling map 3 are, within 300 feet of a home or a coastal evacuation route or a school, so it's not gonna be available.
Right.
well, these maps then, sorry to like jump on top of what you were saying, Seth. These
Yeah.
maps then are only in the Hampton Bays area, or these were reflective of map 3? The aerials.
are
These
all-
maps here are by
Mostly.
zonation, those zones fall on a transmission line that can handle 5 megawatt load discharging or discharging.
Only in Hampton Bays.
Except for the one that's
One
in
in
like
the
Spionk,
trans-
Remsenburg. The end one on the left, I think, represents the far western.
I think
That's
there's one
for
in
all
West
of
Hampton, there's one in
Southampton.
Spionk.
This is for all of
Remsenburg.
Southampton.
Yeah.
On the transmission line.
5 megawatt or above on the transmission line. Those are the only lines that will handle a utility scale, a large scale battery storage system.
Other than the sand mines.
Again, that would be
have
not
to
related
run.
to the transmission lines. They could certainly handle it, but then they would have to interconnect through a transmission bridge. And it was planning's advice that the predominance of these applications are gonna be on the transmission line.
Right.
Because the
So-
economic model does not justify
So that's
burying a
why they
cable.
were proposing 2 of them in Hampton Bays from the outset, most
Absolutely.
likely.
You actually have a transmission line in Spionk, underground.
Yes,
There's
Which
a
is-
transmission line that comes from Riverhead to
Right.
Spionk Riverhead Road, and then onto the south side of Sunrise Highway and follows down Sunrise
Right, that's why
Highway.
this is.
Yeah,
So
here.
that's on
so
there.
that's right in that area there.
That's that one, the one. And there's none on the east end, on the east side of the canal.
not once I put that filter. There's plenty of transmission lines, of course, but nothing that is the highest level.
Okay. Maybe we should take a look at these at least.
Again, we're not saying they can't go there. We're not limiting,
Right.
we're not planning to
No.
limit the code that way.
Right. When I initially said, yeah, well, then we should drill down on the ones that are on the transmission line, I had no idea that they would only
Yeah.
be in Hampton Bays.
Yeah.
But, okay, we can still do more maps of map
Well, I mean,
3.
too, I mean, when you look at the aerials
we did
of the
that.
places in Hampton Bays, most of it's all built out anyway. I mean,
Right.
there's not,
Okay.
Right, so why don't you talk us through each of the 7 locations?
Sure. So we can start on the west. We have Old River, Spionk, Old River. Well, let me get it in front of me. Get it here as well. Okay, so we have a system, transmission line on Spionk Riverhead Road. It splits this LI 40. It goes up not too much further than what you see there. These are, of quite honestly, all of those sites are 1 acre or above. These would fit the qualities that we've discussed, the design criteria. We have the 300-foot buffer there as well. Nothing is falling, except for at the very south there, there is a CR 40, I believe, down there. So-
And that area is several parcels. That's not one parcel.
Oh, no.
So that's at least 10, 12 parcels, right? 2, 4,
18, I see.
18 parcels. So it's 18 parcels that is potentially viable.
Again, with the 300-foot buffer, so.
And there's
we-
no houses in that vicinity, so.
No, except on the
Just
southern
one.
portion.
And there
There's
can't be
one
houses?
house within the 300.
There's the one house,
radius.
but that is within 300 foot of the bottom parcel, so if that would eliminate the very bottom parcel. And I think the next, so that would leave you 17 that are still viable.
But many of them already have, well, these uses may change. This looks like. it's not.
Nothing to say that they, the
Can't change in
people
the
wanna
future.
sell and it's a new use for it. I mean, this to me is like the kind of area that I would look at for one of these things.
That's zoned industrial.
It's
No,
not, it's not
other than the
near-
one house, no houses nearby. And, you
If you
know,
have one,
and that's not in the
Yeah,
core of the
just
Pine
do that.
Barrens, that's in the compatible growth
Down
area,
the
right?
yeah.
Okay.
I
Oh,
bel-
it's in the compatible growth area, so would the Pine Barrens Commission have to give a hardship waiver for
No, no.
someone to go in?
No, hardship is in the core.
Oh, nothing?
Compatible growth is-
Anybody can do whatever they want in the compatible growth?
In compatible growth, you have clearing standards, like we have a, aquifer protection overlay. In compatible growth, you have, clearing limitations.
That's it.
Yeah.
I would also point out that several of these sites are previously developed. This is not undisturbed or vacant land, so that is also something we had set aside as an avoidance area, if they were undisturbed,
It's like-
so.
Okay.
Yeah, I would almost ask the public if they have any.
Yeah, maybe that's the
They
time,
have
to you wanna
any-
do this
would
one
be a
by
good
one?
chance for you to weigh in if you think this is something we should be looking into.
How do you
have
wanna do that,
You have
Maria
speaker
and Cindy?
cards and everything else, I think, that Jackie took to
Yeah, I
start
think we
off
should just
with.
walk, we should just walk
You
through
wanna
I would
it
go
all
through
of
them
them?
all.
And
Yeah.
then do at the
Yeah.
end.
Okay,
Just try to move it along so they say everybody has time.
okay, sure enough.
We got a lot of time.
So again, west to east, then we have West Hampton Beach area, and we have Old Country Road and Montauk Highway. Again, there's only one that's of adequate size,
That's, so you see they're kinda shaded blue, the ones that are
and
an
those are the
acre or
shaded
more.
blue.
That's the only
yes.
one.
That's the only one. But it's a budding residential, so it wouldn't qualify.
Yes, it could very well be,
This right here is-
yeah.
That might be a
It's
coastal
gonna be
flood area.
close.
I think
So it
that
might
one
rule
just
it
wouldn't
out.
work because it's literally shares property lines with
I'm pretty-
residential.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure it's in a surge zone.
The question
That's
is,
a
if
residence
it's
anyway.
less than 1 megawatt, then like, say this HC business there, if they wanted to have battery storage, they
could.
could, as long as it's under 1 megawatt, just to serve their own needs.
Right,
Right,
we are
if they
limiting,
put like solar.
limiting
okay.
this to 1 and above.
Okay, so that's kinda out.
Yeah, there weren't many parcels there to begin with, and right there at that intersection too might not be wonderful either.
No.
So moving on, I believe we have Tiana.
I mean, even if you reduced it to 200 feet, it's still gonna encompass homes, right, on that one?
Yes, yes, it was right nestled up, I mean, it's abutting residences, and I can't speak to if those are commercial enterprises there.
All right,
The,
next one.
the one that's shaded blue
This
is
is
a residence.
multifamily housing, so there's certainly some high occupancy there.
Yeah.
It was all about residential properties, except for this.
Okay.
Okay, so again, moving east.
Now, this is a substation, so is, the bottom piece where the yellow line kind of goes
Yeah.
through it?
Down in here.
No, next to,
Ah,
Where's this one?
Is it possible, instead of having the maps on both sides there, that one of them could be put here on one of the screens? Because like, I'm having trouble seeing back here.
Well, that
And
would
I'm
be
having
on
seeing
that
up
side,
there.
I think.
What?
Seth, can you tell us what side of the room we should be looking at?
Oh,
also?
certainly.
I couldn't even see it.
Yeah, we're going
We're
from
going
west to
direct-
east.
Yeah, but we're on that
we
side.
can't fix
Oh,
them
are
over
ya?
here, because this is the Zoom TV, so we can't put the map on that one.
But I mean, these are
I
identical
need
here.
a
The
back
maps
for the
here.
other members,
So why
but
the two have
perhaps
to?
you can share these.
Well, because we need to see one and then you see one.
The laptop is on that.
Selfish, I forgot.
Yeah, because you jumped over there from
I
here.
see.
Kevin, can you put the presentation on the screen that's facing?
We just did that one.
If that's facing them, why can't they look up? Oh. What's the location for this one?
This is Hampton Bays
I've
at the
even
end of
skipped one
24.
myself. There's an
See
east-
where it says SCB on the screen? That's Macy's, just to orient you. What I'm saying is, this
Yeah,
is
there's
like,
one
they
east of there.
put battery storage in right here, and that won't matter.
Well, that's on them.
Right,
The one at my house.
That's where it's gonna end up.
exactly, so we should just skip over this whole
I
thing.
go
Although
back to
they
keep
should
an eye
do
on it.
their own thing at the supermarket.
Or I may own it.
Shopping. They could do their own
Maybe it's mine.
kinda heat exchange thing.
This is preserved.
Mm-hmm, that's the old, Tiana
Sorry,
Company.
I'm having a hard time finding it.
And isn't this the sump?
Mm-hmm.
So why is it blue?
Which one are you on? Why is this?
I think it's not in order.
Oh.
It's where we're at here.
Why are they not in order?
I don't know.
That one?
Yep.
East Tiana. Is that the one we're on now?
We're on east of Tiana.
Yes.
So it went from there to the next one to the next one. What's the third one on the wall there?
That's this one. That's west of Tiana Bay.
Oh,
I think you skipped one.
You skipped west of
That's what it
Tiana,
is, west of. Yeah,
because that was the proposed.
I
Yeah.
think I
West of-
have,
west
I
of
might have put
Tiana?
one out of order. That's the west of the canal. That should be, that one's out of order. We can go to west of canal next.
Wait, where?
just do the east of Tiana, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, yep, that one.
That's
That's
west of
the one.
Tiana. That's west of Tiana.
There we go.
So that's the third map on the wall. We just did Spionk, then we did the West Hampton. Now we're in the, near the one that was actually proposed.
Yes. This is the one with Wild by Nature.
Right by
on
Wild
it.
by Nature, Jones's Road, over there.
Where it has the HB on the map is where one was proposed.
Yeah, that was the old RTW, multifamily
East of Tiana.
proposal, but then there was one proposed. So that met the size criteria, but again, when you apply that yellow buffer of 300 feet, it then falls within that, where there's residences within 300 feet.
Yeah, this is all multifamily
So-
homes.
Within
Yeah.
300 feet of what point? The center of the parcel or
The
what?
boundary of the
Property
property
line.
line,
The property line.
just to be more
So if you
conservative.
set it back on
If
the
you set it
parcel,
back, it may
you could have
work.
more than 300 feet potentially.
Yeah,
Not
depending on where you
to
put
say
it.
that that's what we want to do, but just so
We were
that we
just trying to be
understand.
conservative because we didn't want to guess where it would be on the
Okay.
parcel.
It's right by Wild by Nature on Montauk Highway.
Right. Yeah, the 300 is open to debate. I think what we want to, we could, by putting out these numbers, it really, this shows you what 300 means and how it can be very limiting or it can open up possibilities. I would say that South Hole did come back with 750 feet. So for your consideration, that's what their task force is recommending.
And on what basis, do you know? I know 300 feet was
they-
an off-gassing criteria, right, from somewhere?
Yes, that was
Are they doing
They
700?
came to it as between 500 and
They're making
1,000. So they
recommendations.
Was it
agreed
seven
upon
fifty,
750.
was Southold
But is that
750 across the
750
board, or
from
was
the
that
property
750
line?
from special hazard categories?
That was for hazard categories, high occupancy, schools,
Right,
hospitals,
right.
along
So,
those
I don't know
lines.
if it's the same, I don't know if it's apples to apples on that, you know, it's.
We
their
just
se-
put
Their
a-
750 might have been from, you know, hospitals, schools.
Right.
Sensitive areas, I think.
Right,
they'll
right,
call
critical
it.
infrastructure type thing, whereas, right now, we're just talking 300 in general from any,
Any point.
any residences.
Mhm.
So, yeah, okay.
Right.
So whether or not that's the standard, you can now visually see what that means. And that's the point of this exercise. We're not saying it has to be 300, 700, whatever. It's just so you can see what it means.
So
That's
there-
not to say that Wild by Nature then couldn't do batteries for their own supermarket, right? If, as long as it's less than 1 megawatt.
Right.
Okay. Okay, moving right along.
Okay, moving along,
East of Tiana Bay?
east of Tiana Bay.
It's the Macy's one.
But as Ryan's saying, if it was located at the back of the parcel, then it wouldn't be 300.
This is all residential.
Oh. Okay.
Like,
We don't have Gary Stevenson today, but the question I would have for him is, would LIPA ever just do it on the substation parcel? Because they would not,
he said they would.
they would. So then we wouldn't really have to worry about these if they're doing that. But these would just be, again, pretty much ineligible.
Well, why wouldn't we have to worry about it?
Because they don't have to come to us for zoning.
But if the
It's not.
state adopts the recommendations of the interagency committee or the 2024 International Fire Code and removes the exemption from municipalities and power authorities from not having to comply with the regulation, then they still would have to come to us,
Yeah.
which hopefully they would adopt that.
So these, like Bowman's Resort,
Right.
Yep.
they actually, well, no, because this is within the 300 feet, right? So that could be, that's out. These are just being developed.
Seth, you want to tell us about this one?
It's the diner. That's the,
That's the
There's,
diner.
there's a few parcels that seem to maybe fit the bill, and if you look under the OD, I see that one parcel there that's nestled. Again, we're looking for something,
That's the
it's
sum.
going to be close to the
State.
substation. It seems to
No, that's
have a
all.
300 feet. If you just drew a bubble around that one
Oh, wait, no,
trapezoid,
that's-
you might very,
Excuse me, are you still on West Tiana Bay? West
East
East?
of Tiana
You're on
Bay.
east.
yes.
where's that this?
That's the sum. That's our general municipal that we got from Friendly's.
Sure.
we
So
can
there's,
do it.
again, not a great deal of parcels. We might need to explore the idea
think we're
that
getting
we
to
had
that
proposed putting these the infrastructure, the mechanics in the center of the property. Maybe we want to explore 300 feet from the center or something as a possibility in order to open up more possibilities, just a suggestion.
I think we're trying to just drill down on not opening up more possibilities, but finding the safest spots and saying,
Absolutely.
these are the only spots that work. And these are the ones that don't work because of X, Y, and Z.
Right.
So,
Okay.
again, if there's no, we would just have to really focus on the ones under where it says OD, because they're the closest to the substation, without impacting any homes.
But SCB is in the zones that we're allowing it, the best zone.
Well, right now, they are allowed, and in the end, you'll have to decide whether they should be eliminated, once now looking at the maps.
Yeah, I don't think we should do village business. I think village business should be.
Yeah, I don't, we just left it as, we didn't want to presuppose anything. So we said, leave it,
Yeah.
except the residential, so take that off, and now we're sort of an iterative process to
Sure, we
say,
keep whittling
does
down.
anything work in VB? No,
don't
take it
think
off.
so.
Does anything work in shopping center business? No. Does anything work, and that's sort of the point.
Absolutely.
Again, now we're on downtown too, and there's nothing.
Well,
That works.
are they within 300 feet of a residence or a hospital or a school on this map?
Residents.
Coastal evacuation route.
coastal evacuation route.
Some of these,
Some-
like.
So really,
the-
the only place though that I've seen, the only place that I've seen that works is on Old Riverhead Road in Remsenburg.
Right, but let's keep going, so we're
We'll
not
keep-
done yet.
Keep trying.
Because this is residences.
I'm on the last one.
That's the last one?
Don't jump ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, we have Hampton Bays to go.
Yeah, like, I just don't
You're
think
So the
it's right.
downtown
No.
business district doesn't make any sense.
No.
The only area,
For
before
utility
this.
scale now.
For utility scale, for like,
Is that Macy's?
yes. Macy's would work. And the ones that say OD would work, because there's no, residential. Other
So-
than that, none of those other ones would work. Well,
What's
these
this?
would work. There's no, oh no, this is a
What's all
subdivision. That's
What's
the
this?
atrium, the Hampton atrium.
Where, like, the
Oh,
medical
yeah.
We're looking
offices
at
are.
Hampton Bays
Not yet.
downtown.
Graphically challenged.
Sorry.
Oh, switch.
Yeah, that's Hampton
So
Bays
then this
downtown.
would work.
Right here.
Yep.
The
If there's no
atrium
residences.
property is maxed out, and this is multifamily. So I don't think so.
And there's more multifamily going
Yeah,
here.
so I don't think the atrium, I think only OD and the ones over here. Where, Bowen's Resort, but you have this subdivision right there, so that's out. There's really nothing there other than the Macy's parcel.
OD's the back of the
That's
diner.
all like senior apartments.
OD's the back
So
of the
then that's
diner.
residential, so
Yeah.
the OD wouldn't work.
No.
So that's why, we didn't wanna
Verona Bay, there's,
conclude all these things
a
for
couple
you,
of
wanted
doctor's
you to see
offices
them.
there,
Mhm.
and there's also residences behind those
Why
doctor's
wouldn't this
offices.
work?
It would,
It would.
that's what I'm saying, that's probably the only
There's no
one.
risk.
There's also the
No, I
two,
mean, south of the highway.
the
though,
two
it's-
large,
Yeah.
the
It's
two
the
larger
diner.
buildings, that's an apartment house.
Yeah, but
next
the,
to
but
Buckley's.
they're specifically talking about over here, so just east of them.
So we move into downtown, what
Yeah.
she's got up there.
So you wanted to.
I think village business should be out.
So we're basically left with only, which was what everybody wanted in the first place, but we didn't wanna just eliminate everything, and there's no other, the concern I
this?
have is what is it zoned on the east side of the canal?
Right.
Where is this one that we're looking at?
This is now
Can you
downtown.
describe
Downtown.
it?
Downtown, straight, yeah, Good Ground Park. there at the
Good
north.
Ground Park is right here.
That's all where you wanna put, your potential mixed-use areas, and you have office district. It's really for like, your
Yeah, the
downtown.
Sorry, the transmission line runs right through Main Street, and then it goes on to Argonne. So it does dip south. But there's no potential down there, as it's all residential. So these were the only ones that would be permissible. Unfortunately, they don't seem to work very well.
Now we're on downtown.
And then we had no transmission lines east of the canal?
They go to the canal, right around where the canal project was, and then that's where they seem to end.
Okay.
So, and they do, there are transmission lines that hug the peninsula, the coast of the Hampton Bays Peninsula on Canoe Place,
But it's all residential.
but again, all residential.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe that underground transmission line runs all the way to Southampton.
Oh, okay. Well, I can't speak to the capacity.
We have one more-
I haven't
one more
checked.
I
map.
know it does.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
It runs, I believe when they ran that from Riverhead,
okay.
and it ended at, I believe it ended at David White's Lane.
Okay.
And then Seth, we have one more map, right?
I believe so, yes.
So there's
Yeah,
nothing
we
in
get-
here that's not within 300 feet of a residence?
No.
I
Okay.
just don't think we should be putting it in village business, because that's not fair to the hamlets that don't have villages.
Yeah, but even if we let it be, it doesn't work, because it's, right? There's
one's
too many,
next?
there's residences within the yellow.
Mhm.
Because we don't want to be accused of limiting it so much that it's
They override
going to
everything.
frustrate the whole process, right? So, but if
Well,
we
there's
can, it's
also,
the
I mean,
same
if you're
result.
talking about citing a fire hazard, do you want that fire hazard in your downtown?
No,
No.
of course not. But this was,
But you're not solving any
here.
problems for the east side of the canal either.
No.
Like, we have to figure that part out, because that's the part where,
Well, I'm sure
It's
there
the-
are transmission, I mean, there's a substation in Southampton Village.
Yeah, there's gotta be more
There's a
transmission. lines.
substation
There
in
are
how can
definitely
it
more
be that there's
transmission lines,
nothing
but
on the
these are
east
the-
side?
And they're in
I
villages.
have filtered out for the largest transmission lines that.
Okay,
that are
so
accessible.
I think
5
that's where we.
megawatts and above.
Right, so I think that's maybe where we need to get more input from LIPA on the next conversation, because if you filtered it based on the 5 megawatt capability or something like
Yes.
that, but we're looking at anything from 1 on up, so there could be opportunity for, something that's only 1 or 2 meg in an area, and there's transmission lines that are capable of it, so.
This is true, yes.
And they
I would
said
not
that
rule
they
them
would
out.
My
build-
other
they would
question
build new
is-
ones.
Right.
well, this isn't the last meeting.
But
We're
hold on, so
doing
my
this
other
for a
question is,
while
if
now,
we say, so
this is the
far,
beginning.
we've gone through all these maps and we've said this LI 40 in Spion-Prenzlberg is really the only place where it works, meeting the criteria that we have set to date, right?
Yes.
So, is that spot zoning? If you're
No.
saying that's the only place in the whole town it can go?
No,
Well, it's
spot
not-
zoning is not that. So you're talking about something where you're adding a use in a certain area that meets a certain criteria. So you're saying industrial zones, and now our next, we're gonna hear from everyone, but our next iterative process would be, where else are there industrial zones in the town, east of the canal, that work? We need to,
Well,
we
they're
do
all right
have,
on the
we have
map.
Butter Lane.
They're right there. on
No,
the
that doesn't
second
really
map.
go past Hampton Bays, though, to be fair.
No, the
Like,
first map.
The second
Yeah,
map,
the
No,
first and
those
second, yeah.
maps,
Yeah.
we filtered based on some LIPA data, some information about transmission lines,
I
but
thought we
those,
just took out we took out the residential, so those are all the areas that could work.
those are all the areas that are left. We didn't say
Right.
that could work. Now we're getting into what could work, and that's what we thought we were trying to locate things on transmission lines, because that's like the low-hanging fruit, the easiest thing that someone could do, without building transmission bridges or having to pay a lot more money. But what I'm suggesting is that, so far, okay, we've located 17 parcels on the western part of town that this works, zoned LI 40. Everybody said, keep it out of residential, only industrial. Great, we found 17 parcels on the west side. Now we gotta figure out what's on the east side. And then if you got 17 over here and 10 over there or wherever, then now that's can't be spot zoning. That's just, these are the ones that meet the criteria. And then you can go on from there. Right, so I think we found our winner on the west side. If that's
We don't wanna
positive.
just
If
say
you wanna.
one place.
It's not
You
one,
can't
it's
just say it.
17 different parcels. Those are each eligible.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So we're just saying they're eligible, but if we put this second, this other layer of restriction, not within 300 feet of,
That's on
That
that.
meets it.
yeah,
That meets that.
not that, not really, that's only with the, that third map is only the ones
No,
that
no,
are
no,
within
we're
the-
saying the only one
Seth,
that
bring
we,
up that
is
Spionk
that
map.
one, that Spionk-Remsenburg one.
Only because it's based on the 5 megawatt, right? What if it's a
Right.
3 megawatt or 2
No, that's over
megawatt?
one.
Right.
No, I
No,
think Seth said
but he
it was
narrowed it
5.
based on 5 megawatt transmission lines.
Yeah.
But
So you have
still,
nothing between,
One and
nothing
5.
represented that might be along the transmission lines
Between
under
one and
5
'Cause
megawatts,
we were
but
saying
between 1 and
above.
5.
1 and above, right?
Right.
Well,
I think we may have narrowed it too much.
Yeah.
With, listen, maybe that's where we end up. I'm not saying we need to add more places into it.
Yeah.
But for the purposes of these maps and what you've narrowed it down to here, I think we maybe narrowed it too much in this area, on this version, so by just excluding it to the 5 megawatt transmission lines.
Yeah, the only reasoning behind it was that the applications have been for 20, 30, 200, and that those were the applications that have been
Yeah,
before
but
this town.
but that's not our problem. If
No.
they don't want to build it, then they don't
well,
have to.
Gary Stevenson said,
necessarily.
we need 5 megawatt.
Right,
the
and
one-
yeah, they talked about scalability of it and having 1s and 2s. The 2 in East Hampton are both 5 megawatts. They're not 20. They're not, just because we got a proposal for 100 megawatt, doesn't mean that we have to come up with the rules for like the larger scale or assume that only somebody's going to want to build a larger scale. We need to account for the between 1 and 5 as well. And there would potentially be a lot of other parcels that might be highlighted on here in the 1 to 5 range.
Okay, well, we
So,
can certainly
when I
develop
reached
that.
back out and asked Gary about this, he said there's another player in all of this, and that is the grid operator. There is the New York ISO, who operates the grid, and they have done all these studies about how BESS can integrate into the grid. So we need to find, that's another invitee to our meetings, hopefully, if we can get some input from this ISO. But he wrote, the thing to remember is that the South Fork is unusual from an electrical perspective, and this is an area that LIPA is studying very carefully. So I don't even think they know, is my point. They're not entirely sure either. So so even though we seem confused, it's because they don't even really know exactly, because we've got all these, this is a nuanced it's an older grid, and so they don't know entirely where people can integrate in and connect, and how much it should be, so there's that.
Hi, Janice, George here.
Hi, George.
Hi, sorry I can't fully participate. I'm having to go out again for the board verification meeting, but I can't really see the map, but that's okay. I kind of know all you're speaking about. We have at LI 40 subdivision and plan business. Is any of that within the parameters that we looked at? The one near Suffolk County Federal Credit Union.
The one near the school.
That's already has a solar proposal and a small battery storage proposal embedded into it.
But they're on one lot, right? Not, there's,
Yeah. Well, half that subdivision is going toward the sewage treatment plant, and the other side of that subdivision has, you know, a lot, industrial, you know, LI uses. But how did those like not get
Again,
up on
I just
our map?
eliminated anything that wasn't on the transmission lines. So
Okay, so maybe we just need to back out of
we
the
need to back
transmission
down.
line thing.
We started at the very
yeah.
highest level, the biggest projects. Now we'll whittle back down. We'll open it up, I guess, a little bit more with, again, we took the trunk of the tree in terms of transmission lines, where the biggest will be. Now we can go out on the branches and we can see some of the smaller
Is
applications.
it worth having a zoning category for 5 and above, and then 1 to 5,
I thought we said that, yes.
right?
Yep,
Yeah,
I
and I
thought we
think,
were
I think-
gonna
Today,
do
so this is what
planning
we're
board.
looking at is 5 and above.
Yes.
5 and
Well, we're looking at it, under the assumption that nobody would build a 5 megawatt unless they were on the transmission line, which might not be true, but it's, you know, it's probably a pretty safe bet.
right,
But
and they
you
might be
can't be
willing
sure
to,
about that.
you know, they might be willing to, we don't know where the cost-benefit analysis would land
Yeah.
them on that too. They might be willing to go 1,000 feet from the transmission line and say, all right,
Yeah.
I'm willing to pay the amount to run the underground wiring 1,000 feet. But once you cross 1,000 feet, the amount that it costs to run the wire versus what you can gain on it might not be worth it to them. We don't know, and that's kind of up to them to decide. But I think probably, you know, a lesson learned from here today is if we take the attributes of that one in the Spion-Remsenburg area and say, we like this for something of that 5 size, is there anything else in the town that has similar attributes? Like, that could be how we determine, which we know what some of those are, right? It's the 300 feet, it's the this, it's the that. What do we like about this area, if that's the case, if we like that area, if we set, you know,
Right. So the
find
criteria,
other things
yeah.
similar in the town. And if there's nothing similar, then there's nothing similar. But this could be a good example for the 5 and above, and see if there's any other places, whether on a transmission line or not, that's, you know, if somebody doesn't want to build it, they don't have to build it. You know, we don't have to cite it based on the transmission lines. It's up
Yeah.
to the developer.
So our
It's-
next criteria is just other LI 40s, put the 300-foot buffer around them,
Yeah.
anywhere in the
Well,
town.
I don't know, I think, you know, if we kept these two, we have here these best zones that are on the map, but you want to take out village business, because that makes sense, you don't want anything directly in the downtown.
We can certainly highlight them differently so that
Right.
they're
When
pulled
we
out.
first came up with this initially, we, you know, and we have our rep from NYSERDA, it was based on a model code, and the idea was that these things were non-traffic generating, not noisy, and not gonna blow up. So we didn't, it was a new thing that we didn't anticipate. No one knew that it was going to have all those impacts. So we had them in many, many zones. Now we're trying to eliminate those areas and say, well, that doesn't make sense based on what we know today. So it says best zones, that's from the original code that we have a stop on, and now we're peeling back those things and saying, not this zone, not that zone. But so far, I think we can all agree that the LI 40, which was always on there, is like the only winner, and maybe LI 200, which we don't really have much of, and that's mostly at the airport.
I just hate it because we don't have enough LI 40 for businesses to operate.
We don't have anything else.
And Seth, you didn't overlay the 100-year flood zone
No.
on any of this either, right? Okay. I think if we did that, we would find that the West Hampton Old Country and Montauk Highway one would be ineligible. And on some of the code revisions and stuff like that that we were looking at, and even the current code, anything in the floodplain area was,
Well, that
I
was an
think,
avoidance
generally
area
eliminated.
initially.
Yeah, exactly, from consideration. So that one, if we overlaid the floodplain area, we wouldn't even be looking at that map probably
The
today.
West
Can you just access
The
GIS
West
right
Hampton
now,
Old Country
Seth?
Road and Montauk Highway map.
So Seth can just go on our
Just
GIS.
pull it up.
And pull it up and pull up the LI 40s on the east side. Just because we didn't create a map with GIS doesn't mean we don't have it, because we do.
Sure.
It's probably, I don't know if I missed something, one of my hearing aids isn't working at all. But the transmission lines, where do they start and where do they stop? They seem to go, you get my point, like, what do they connect to, what do they connect from? How do we arrive at a?
It's the
Substations
substation.
being
Yeah.
the base of the tree, and then they branch out and get smaller, like a tree does. What we're looking at are those initial lines that can handle the most capacity for charging and discharging.
Okay,
They
so,
certainly run from the substations.
so every one of these
Is
areas contained within a red line has a substation.
It's not that it has a substation, it's that it's off of, imagine it being off of one of the primary distribution lines out of the substation. As that power goes out further and further, the line capacity dissipates, so when it gets to your house, it's a much lower version of power. But, so the places that are identified are on here are on that like highest capacity portion of the transmission lines that go out from the
Okay,
substation.
but if the substation isn't necessarily there, it's coming from a substation that would have even higher capacity than what's in the red lines from, if I understand what you're saying correctly?
Or the same.
As
They would be the same?
equal or higher, I would say, would probably be a fair estimate. That would be a better question for LIPA, but equal or higher capacity. The substation must have at least 5 megawatts worth of production capacity or whatever that it's releasing, or perhaps it's higher than that, and they throttle that energy off before they push it out, whatever the case is. But it can handle at least that 5 megawatt capacity.
So the substation could also put in transmission lines unless they're that prohibitively expensive in a different direction? Would that be correct?
So yeah, I guess yes would be the easy answer to that, but I think that's what we're talking about here too, is it would be potentially on the developer to decide, if I'm not on that high capacity, 5 megawatt transmission line, how far off of it am I willing to go and pay the money to connect to that high capacity transmission line? Yeah.
Because at our last meeting, LIPA said it was very expensive to run those lines.
Yeah, what was, I don't remember what the estimate was. What was it, like $3 to $5 million per mile or something like
Yeah.
that? Something like $3 to $5 million per mile
was
to
five-
do the
I think it-
underground, five?
5 million a mile.
I know I wasn't gonna pay it, so I didn't pay attention to the
But they could build another
number.
substation, that's still true.
In the village of West Hampton Beach, we buried a lot of just the plain old electric lines underground. How much is that a mile? Because I remember years ago, when King Cullen was built, it seemed outrageous, in King Cullen and Hampton Bays. So what is that compared to how much it is?
That
per
was
mile?
just under $1 million.
What?
It was just under $1 million to
So
bury
it's
the
$1 million
utilities
a
lines.
mile,
Yeah.
and this is
But those are different transmission lines,
Yeah.
just to be clear.
No,
That's not that high
I understand
capacity,
that.
yeah,
I just wanted some basis of comparison of something, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just on the idea of the distribution, that you really want to go for a bigger facility rather than lots of little ones, having looked at the economics of this, that if you could put 20, 30, 40, 50 megawatts in there, you would be so much better off than lots of little fives all over the town. That by the time you got all the cabling in and you got the approvals and you did everything else, that for the developer, for LIPA, for everybody else involved, you're just much better going large rather than going downscale.
But so what LIPA had said to us too, though, is, and I think this is something else that they kind of take into consideration, is they need these in different locations, they need them to handle different loads, but also in the case of East Hampton, that's a 5 megawatt system, you know, and a fire in one bank of their batteries and the whole thing is shut down for, I don't know, a year?
And I think Seth had also shared some information with us from research before this meeting too, just for reference, for scale. What does 5 mean? Like unless any of us have worked. So 5 megawatts, based on the information that you had put out, will power 1,000 homes for 4 hours or 150 homes for a day. So 5 might seem small compared to 20, obviously, but 5 at being able to power 150 homes for a day still has value within the system. And if the system has to drop off, if it has to load shed, if they're trying to store energy that's coming in from renewables, whatever the case is, it still does give value to it. And you know, I understand what you're saying with, you know, trying to put 20 onto one spot versus popping a bunch of little 5s around and stuff like that. But if you can't get 20 onto it and you have to move a few 5s into different places, if that helps contain the risk a little bit too, where it's more manageable and you can maintain those setbacks from other properties, whether that's setbacks from residents, whether that's setbacks from a major congestion, you know, artery within the town in terms of traffic, whatever it is, then it's stuff that we would want to look at and consider.
I think that we're agreed. My
Yeah, this
point
transmission
was,
part is
you get into
confusing.
costs based on, you want to have most of your costs in the battery storage, not in the distribution. You assume that the distribution is got, you know, if you spread it all out, you got all your money in distribution, you don't have it in the storage. And that's was the consideration for why, and I didn't say 100 megawatts, but I mean, you're also going to need something on the east end of the deal. But rather, if you can get away with 2 or 3 rather than 10, you're going to be better off because all your money is going to be in cable rather than in the battery
Sure.
storage itself.
Sure, and the size the size achievable of the facility may impact what the developer is willing to pay to do the interconnect if they have to go off of that original transmission line or not. You know, at 5 megawatts, at 3 megawatts, it might really not be worth it for them. I have no idea. I'm just saying, you know, hypothetically. At 20, maybe they'll go 300 feet off of it. I have no idea.
My understanding was that that LIPA would be buying really the storage capacity, and the distribution is something that they're gonna have to put up with in order to get you there. But when they make their deal, it's not going to be, look at all this distribution that we have. It's gonna be, look at the battery storage.
Does NYSERDA have any insight in?
I apologize for my silence to this moment. I wasn't sure if I was free to hop in.
Yeah, please do. Why don't you introduce yourself, just so we all know you?
Yeah. I'm certainly happy to. Hi, folks. My name is Ken Latimer, Senior Project Manager on the Clean Energy Setting Team. I'm a colleague of, and work very closely with Bill Overcare, who you heard from the last month's meeting. And there's my face. He has been, you know, our team's liaison, helping lead the interagency fire safety working group. Prior to that, Bill and I have both spent most of the last 5 years working with folks like y'all in meetings like these across the state. So Janice, you may not recall, but in a different life a couple years ago, I had a lot of back and forth with Michelangelo Lieberman working on the iteration of the law you guys previously passed. We had some correspondence then as well. So all of that to say that, like, really appreciate the work that you guys are putting in. It's a pleasure to be invited to speak, and obviously happy to do the best that I can to opine. I'll just say a couple of thoughts on that front. So to the gentleman in the audience whose questions I couldn't quite make out just due to the microphone issues, I'll just note that one of the challenges which you guys are actively encountering around regulating battery energy storage systems is that they're a lot more complicated than things like solar because they can do a lot of different things. So what you guys are talking about, what we call like front of the meter energy storage systems, where their primary purpose is providing grid-wide services, they're not tied to a specific use. That's where you're really talking about these, like, 1 megawatt and larger projects. But you can have, a plethora of sized projects that are sized based on load, which is why, using solely a megawatt or kilowatt threshold, I think can be a little challenging, which I think you guys are actively encountering right now, versus trying to think about these batteries as more about serving on-site use versus, grid-wide services. So even if you have, a certain number of larger grid-scale batteries, you still want to be zoning for businesses and, residents in your community to be able to utilize behind-the-meter energy solutions for their own on-site uses, which can help save, money.
Right, this
we
is
have
all
that,
1
yeah.
megawatt and above, so any like supermarket, provided they're below, and that would be a question we have for you, is that adequate? But anybody would still be able to do battery storage, it's just the 1 plus is what we're talking about, either way, I think.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I guess I was just kind of responding to the question in the audience as to say, like, well, why don't we just do one massive one, then everyone knows where it is, and you don't have to worry about the distributed, nature of those projects. Whereas, I think realistically with storage, you're more likely to see, a number of, and I think that Gary from LIPA probably had this message, there is value for systems kind of across sizes and use cases. Especially when you start looking at, the load profile of Southampton, where, 1 or 2 20 megawatt systems is not enough to cover the peak load that you guys might be using, at the hottest day of the year or the coldest day of the year. And that's where, yeah, I would just be wary of thinking about it solely in terms of limiting it to a certain number of projects for certain capacities. If that makes sense.
Thank you.
I didn't catch his name.
Tell us your name again?
Liam,
Ian.
Ian,
I still don't.
Ian.
Ian, oh, thank you.
from NYSERDA.
It wouldn't be the first time I've been Liam. I'll be whoever you need me.
Where is he from?
From
NYSERDA.
NYSERDA.
NYSERDA, New York State Energy
I know
Research.
when the third one is.
Okay.
Couldn't hear him.
So at this point, I mean, do you want to just open it up and let people come up and talk about what they think
think
about
so.
what we've done
Yeah.
to date before we,
I think so.
Yeah, sure.
so if,
I mean,
do you have the cards?
I do. Bill, well, would you like to add some more?
Yes, sir.
Well, I have 3 minutes, and it won't be
It's only
complaining.
3 minutes.
No, you can,
Say that, Bill.
we're not limiting you to 3
Say
minutes.
It's not a town.
Oh, it's not?
No,
oh,
we're not
okay,
limiting
good,
you.
good, okay.
No, we switched to 30 seconds.
Although if I see Bridget's head explode, then it's time for you.
Thanks, Bill. Next.
This is, this, really, I have been away and I'm back, and just to see the difference in the tone and the tenor and the productivity, and just even the approach that you have taken. It has not been, how do we shoehorn something into the community? It has been, open it up and let's look at it analytically, and let's have it fall where it may in terms of what is the best solution for the community. I'd say also that the work that Janice has done here just really helps the community. You get an idea of what's involved, and the approach that Seth has taken in the way that he went about drilling down and everything, just terrific. To look at what criteria you had, wonderful, very, very helpful. The approach that Ian was making, I don't see it as an either or. You might have a 20 and a 20, and then particularly for light industrial applications and everything else. What you spent the whole first part of your meeting at the last sitting was you looked at all of the different sizes that could meet the different applications within the community. So I think that's great, the way that it has been worked. Just to play Cassandra a little bit, since the moratorium went into effect, there have been 24 BESS fires since the moratorium went in. And I know the chemistry is changing and this is happening and that's happening, but if you go back in the literature 5-6 years ago, they had this solved already. And then, 100 fires later, maybe not. So I think also that the original application referred to a remote site and also an industrial site. Clearly, Canal BESS was neither one of those. So that the original application, I know everybody was spilling out of COVID and there was a lot of running in different directions, but that was misleading and I think it got you off on a wrong path to get started with that. And I'm just so happy that we have passed by that. Other than just killing time at this point, I'd say you really have nailed it. Thank you so much. And it's so good to see you working so well together. And just to my friends here as well, it's interesting that their concerns have not been for not in my backyard, but they're looking at other people's homes and other people's businesses, so that it really has been truly civic-minded rather than self-interested. And I think that both sides of the table should congratulate themselves. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your support. Kevin, could you fix the display, please, so that it's not just stuck on Ian? So that we can see people from home can see the speakers. All right, Seth, who's
Yeah,
next?
Bridget, there, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Bridget Marr, for those who haven't met yet. I'm a member of the Between the Bays Community Association. Phil Metzger, Chrissy is not here. She's coming from work, I know. But Phil Metzger is right there. Chrissy and I have been Zooming in and rewatching these steering committee meetings, bless our souls, because they're pretty tough. And you're doing a great job, really. Phil was on the money with that. We've emailed you our comments. I'm here, I've seen you nod, thank goodness, that's nice. I'm glad you're reading them and I can tell you're reading them. I appreciate that, we appreciate your diligence, because this is, Seth, Janice, this is nice. This is nice to see, we're really happy to see it. If you haven't been reading them, but it sounds like you have, I'd like you to know you should be, because we're here because of all of the things that the Between the Bays people and the Civic Association, people in the community of Hampton Bays came together and said, hey, look, this is getting a little scary. And we went on for over a year doing that. And so we posed questions to you that we think are still valid, and we're hoping that you'll be able to answer them at some point. I'd like to read from you from the resolution, the 2024-400 resolution, which is the reason we're all here. It's the creation of this steering committee. The town board is aware of the need to allow for renewable energy, and we have been saying from the get-go, it's a must. But there's a balance with such goals, and it's paramount concern for public safety and maintaining residential character of our neighborhoods, and you're doing that, and it sounds, I'm so happy. We've been involved in this for a while, and just as Bob, I'm gonna do a little Cassandra of my own. As Bill mentioned, I'm sure you're aware, there was a fire in Otay Mesa, California on May 15th. It was eventually put out yesterday, I believe, and on day 3 of that fire, an official said it was relatively under control before the next day it flared up again. So these things are still, we've come a long way. None of us knew anything. Hey, we're starting to learn about megawatts and kilowatts now. I mean, it took us long enough to know that. So we're digging and we're doing the right thing, and it's really appreciated. And we're gonna keep watching and we're gonna keep coming. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Can,
Yeah, and thank you for sending your comments, because we do read them, definitely.
yeah, and can we,
One of the
can we
comments
just,
was about the residential, and that would be that stripy map there, so you could see that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, if you're listening, thank you.
can we answer two of the questions
Yeah.
from the last time, the last email as well? On the decommissioning, the question about decommissioning plan that was posed, that, having a decommissioning plan is actually part of the requirements to even start. You don't get to think about how you're gonna take it apart or shut it down after you've been given the okay to start it up. You have to already identify what the decommissioning plan is ahead of time. So, just so you know, it's definitely part of the initial requirements to even get an approval, is to have the decommissioning plan already lined up. Now, hopefully with some of the developments in the 2024 International Fire Code that hopefully the state will adopt, there's even stricter requirements on that are being factored in and thought about. There's recommendations that are being factored in. I know on here, some of the discussion, I would love to see that be forced to be updated on some sort of a basis beyond that, so that as technology and lessons learned improve, whatever your decommissioning plan at the outset, on year one was, that might have opportunity for enhancement and development as time goes on and you learn more things about how to recycle components or whatever it is that was technology that maybe you didn't know about at the very beginning. But that is one thing. And then the training requirement that was also mentioned in the last conversation, the 2024 International Fire Code, that is a requirement under that code. And again, I just keep pitching the 2024 International Fire Code here. I would really like the state to adopt it and us to be able to utilize that as a tool for us for any future, approvals. I know that might require a little bit more of a wait time, but it really takes a lot of lessons learned and safety enhancements into consideration. It adds NFPA 855 in as a reference standard and other things that have kind of been fine-tuned. Some of the recommendations of the interagency working group are already really kind of incorporated into the 2024 International Fire Code. So as soon as the state would adopt the 2024 IFC and make whatever localized modifications to it that they want to, I think the safer everything would be. But training requirements are worked into that. They should be on an annual basis. It should be, there should be drill requirements and other sorts of things. So it's a thought that's already, it's already a thought that's been considered in the codes community, and it's something that we're definitely advocating for too.
I think a question on the decommissioning though, Ryan,
Yeah.
is you can have a decommissioning plan, but if it's an LLC and they go bankrupt, who do you go after to actually decommission the project?
It comes to Superfund rules at CERCLA after that. You end up in a
Yes.
circumstance of federal regulations kick in if you lose control.
Thank you very much.
I think as well, before
The
the town
site, the
board.
site property owner is always responsible under federal law if they left, like some kind of, say they went bankrupt and left us with some kind of decommissioning that we had to do, we would invoke the Superfund regulations, which cause the property owner to have to clean them. We can sue the property owner to clean it up. So that's how that
I
works.
just wanted to tell you that what I just handed to you is, it's a year old, but it's the documentation that between the bays, a lot of, all the people here are between the bays, except I'm not sure if you are. That's the documentation that we put together, and it's very compelling. It may be a little dated at this point, but even just look at the pictures. They give you a sense of what we were trying to say all along. And it may be news to you, or it's probably old news, but Cindy and Maria already got a copy, so I didn't bring it up for everybody.
Thank you. Chief, did you want to say something?
I was just going to add to what Ryan was saying. Not only is it important that the requirement to have a decommission plan be in place, which I guess what he's saying it already is, but both sides of the table want to see what does it look like, and maybe can we add more to it here? Can we make sure that maybe part of that decommission plan is it leaves the town at the end of this? Or there's something else that we can do to make it stricter than it already is?
Excuse me, Chief. In the last meeting, I heard one of the Zoom participants mention that there was a 20-year life to these systems. In the field, they've turned out to be more 8 to 12. So the economics of that is really a heck of a lot more.
Is
I
that
don't
true,
know.
Ian? Does,
Beg pardon?
does NYSERDA know, is that, what's the lifespan of these things? Do you have them?
You'll notice I was leaning in. I couldn't quite make up. But
Just how the lifespan of these, we had it in our code, it's 20 years. Is it 8 to 12 years?
I've looked at some research papers that say 8 to 12.
If I may, it's really dependent on the
On the use,
on the
exactly.
usage and the makeup, the design of the battery themselves.
Manufacturers, like equipment manufacturers, will typically warranty their products for timeframes. I think we've seen ones that are warranted up to 20 years. The extent to which it lasts that long is kind of going to depend on how those batteries are being managed. You know, what is the depth of charge and discharge? What is the cycling? That will have big impacts on what
So I think that the comment last time also, and I don't want to speak for the LIPA rep that was on with us, but was more based on the fact that I think what he had prefaced it by saying was that they do like 20-year agreements. So they have this expectation that it's going to last 20 years, whether the person that they have the agreement with for the site maybe has to swap out some batteries in the meantime or whatever it is. Maybe they don't really concern themselves too much with that, but they expect that based on the agreement that they're going to have a 20-year relationship with that site. So I don't know that it necessarily accurately depicted how long a battery could last as much as it
Well, they-
spoke to the agreement.
He also stated that, you know, it may be like a phase in, phase out of
Yeah,
batteries.
right.
Because like they were saying that, you know, just for instance, Tesla batteries, you know, as they lose their ability to be functioning for a car because they have to, you know, they have to charge and discharge very rapidly, they could then, what they're looking at potentially to recycle those car batteries into a BESS facility, because in a BESS facility, they charge and discharge much slower. So the batteries themselves would still have extended life beyond a car battery because they could use them, you know, as a facility because they wouldn't need such a fast charge and discharge. So, you know, but these are all things like we don't know, and when I said this at the last meeting too, as technologies change and as the batteries change, you know, it's possible that we revisit this code in another, you know, year, another 5 years, because battery, you know, technology has improved so you know, drastically that they're no longer the fire hazard that that they currently seem to be. So,
And I think that's why also us potentially working in every 2 year, every 3 year, whatever, review of the decommissioning plans, so that what they walk in the door with doesn't necessarily stay the same thing as we learn more things, isn't a bad idea as
Maybe
a
that's
concept.
something that gets referred to the Public Safety Committee, that commission.
and also, I mean,
That
I'm
other committee
concerned
that you
too.
guys have. I'm sorry that.
I'm sorry. I'm concerned too, though, with them, you know, maybe the facility itself has a decommissioning plan, but if they're changing out, like, where are those batteries going during the life of this facility? Are they staying here? Are they going, you know what I mean? Like, are they just moving them, keeping them on site, but they're no longer in use?
No,
Or
because
is-
they have to be
removed
disposed,
from
and
the
that
site?
says it in the code, actually, they have to be disposed in.
Damaged cells have to be removed.
I'm not saying damage, I'm saying maybe they're not
Just
as,
low
you
efficiency.
know.
We
Low
can put it in the
They're not up
code,
to
no
capacity.
storage
The
on site of
the
other,
developer will wanna
of
pull those
defunct
out.
batteries, but like, it's like a cell tower, they switch out equipment all
Yeah,
the
but, like,
time.
where
And
is
we
that
don't,
equipment
they
going?
don't, they bring it, they dispose of it in accordance with whatever the law is to dispose of it. They can't just like toss it on the site, you know, if they did, we would have an enforcement action, so.
Yeah, so that's going to be built into the code, and maybe it's a limited permit that we have to review every 10 years or something, you know, and of course, the code is going to be updated
With
periodically.
the hazardous materials spill, you have to turn around and be able to show where the spiller is taking the product that they clean up.
Yeah.
Could actually probably be the same thing. If they're removing it, where's it going?
Yeah.
So that new O said, all efforts will be made to refurbish recycled battery cells packs when they no longer deliver the necessary capacity for their intended usage. Cells/packs that are damaged, and I would add, or defunct, shall be removed from service and disposed of in accordance with state and federal regulations. We should also say local. Local, state, and federal
You
regulations.
know, because the technology's gonna change, and then the lithium-free batteries will be more common, right? And then we'll just adjust and revisit the code.
Right, the sodium is,
Sodium,
Making its
sure,
way to the
solid-state
top.
batteries, there's a
Yeah.
litany that
Yeah.
I've yet to wrap my mind around them all, but it's developing quickly.
Yeah.
More speaker?
keep going.
Yes, we do have one more. Marion Bowden? Would you like to?
Marion Bowden, Hampton Bays. And I'll echo what Bill and everybody said. This is so refreshing. And I'm saying this as a lifelong Democrat to 2 elected Republicans on the town board. But the air is just so much nicer. I feel that would be, I feel that you're coming to us with open hearts and open minds. And trust me, that's a very refreshing sentiment on my part. There was a lot I was going to say that I'm not even going to bother to say, okay, but I'll highlight just a couple of things. One is I'm confused about the neg deck, PAS deck. This is regarding, of course, BESS at the canal. You know, it seems to me, reading the law, although I had someone interpret it for me, I'll admit that, that if new information comes that the agency was not aware of at the time that the neg deck was issued, they must, that was the word I liked, rescind the negative deck and conduct a new environmental review. And I just don't know, has anybody
In
looked
this
into
now,
that?
we're saying that everything has to go through secret, everything.
Yeah, well,
They don't have a
it's-
choice to neg deck
It's
it.
funny, that's what I was gonna say for the future. I was gonna say maybe if something's 5 or greater, it should automatically.
If it's 1 or
One?
greater now,
Okay,
we're
so
saying
even
that
I'm
it's,
a little more liberal than.
we're saying that it's
but-
automatically,
Okay, but I don't know, you know, I think, it sounds like the attorney for, Ryland, or whatever their name is, you know, is upset that we may, you know, rescind the neg deck, and I just don't know what you guys are doing, and I want to reinforce the fact that I certainly hope you do in this particular case.
This is-
You won't even need to, because
What?
you won't need to do
You
any
don't
of
have to
that.
do it. Okay,
because
great, thank you so much. I
It's just
really-
taken off the table,
Okay, I
so that
appreciate that
issue
answer.
goes away.
And I also applaud, and I think you recognize, which I don't think was recognized before, the many, many efforts of the people of Hampton Bays who have worked. I remember several people said, I never even got to the beach last summer, not even once. It was really a nightmare to feel that we were facing a mountain of opposition and knowing in our hearts that we were finding some really good stuff out, that was good stuff that was bad. And one thing I'd like to address, and that has to do with the emergency responses. I know the training is going to be there, and I'm interested as to who would pay for that, but I'm not that interested, okay? What I'm interested in is, and I think it might have been.
It would have to be the developer or the site owner. It wouldn't be, it would be a requirement of, the way it's written into the code right now for the 2024 International Fire Code, which is not the standard that we're on, it's the responsibility
saying
of the owner or the developer to do the training.
Okay.
Well, then nobody's on it. The state hasn't adopted it yet.
And I'm not sure if it was someone from NYSERDA the last time, but it was someone not from around here who seemed to cavalierly dismiss the traffic situation at the canal, which is like the most, how anybody could dismiss that. And I guess what I'm concerned about, even if this thing is off the table, even for future development, you know, it's one thing to have the training, it's another thing to be able to get there, to put it into practice, you know? So if you're trapped over on Argonne Road someplace and you can't get through, and then I even think of people, if there's a health emergency or something like that, what do we do? So it's one thing to have this training in place, it's another thing to be able to put it into action. And I think all of us who are familiar with the situation recognize that, but maybe we haven't verbally said much. I also want to mention something I read that surprised me, again, about the lithium batteries. It's that, you know, we keep being told it's safer and safer and safer. But I was told that the newer forms may have more resistance to fire because they have a lower temperature, but they're more prone to explode. So, and I can send you the citation if you'd like. I got it from, it was actually a alternative energy company that was reporting on things like that. And now how bad, they didn't really go into detail about how horrible the explosion was, but no, less fire. And you see, that's the kind of thing the developer, I could picture saying, oh, there's fewer fires under the new batteries that we're using, and neglect to mention that there's more explosions.
We
So-
are, I'll take, we have like sort of this binder that we're keeping of all the research and stuff, so if you have anything,
Mhm.
please do
Okay.
send it.
And the number one complaint, I'm sure you've heard it before, and I just read another paper based out of Europe, but it was about studies done all over the world. Number one, far and beyond anything else, is noise. Noise, everybody complains about the noise. They said the complaints are growing by leaps and bounds. And part of the problem is also as the batteries are being made, I don't know what you're going to say, one of the ways the batteries are being made more fire resistant is to have better cooling systems in there operating 24/7, creating all kinds of noise. And noise it really can affect your heart. It affects a lot of things. And I think we should count that really strongly as an environmental thing to take place. And over by the canal, that particularly disturbed me because you got 27 going, you know, kind of right over your head. Last but not least, what I think a lot of people don't understand is that the goalpost keeps moving. It was mentioned a little. At first, the systems were no danger. Then, as evidence mounted to counter this, we were told, well, it's a nation technology. It'll be safer by the day. Then, as we read of disastrous fire after disastrous fire, we were told and I served a consultant last year, I don't think it was this person, last year, that Underwriters Lab and ICERTA are working on new requirements and regulations for BESS safety, without mentioning that the systems that blew up had already been approved by those people. And they conformed to what Underwriters Lab thought were the highest standards right up till the moment they exploded. And so, what is the definition of safe? Is safe until the day it catches fire and or explodes? Then will we be told, like, oops, oops? These are our lives, our homes, and our neighborhoods, and I think more and more the town is showing that they take that seriously. We're not experiments in a lab setting, and some of these studies they're really done in a labs kind of setting. And so I ask you to continue to recognize that and go back to what Bridget mentioned, the paramount concern, and these are your words. The paramount concern is for public safety and maintaining the residential character of our neighborhoods. And I applaud you for that. Thank you.
Chrissy, I know you just came in. Did you want to speak?
Oh, sure. Could get in the building. I love the steering committee. I think you guys are doing amazing things. I watch very keenly for each meeting, and then we meet amongst ourselves because so much that you're bringing forth, and then we comment and we send you emails, and I think that is really how this should have been from the get-go, and I'm grateful now. I think that Seth's contributions with the maps and some of the things he's saying, like, I can get that to scale for you. That is very important. That's very important for people in the community that really don't have the idea of where this is going and how big it would be. So it's very helpful. I think that the comment about potential for aggregate properties, that was very important. There's so much coming to the table that I didn't think of, and that I think the purpose of this committee is really bringing it to the table. This might have been mentioned before I got here. The floating zone situation, of course, got my attention because I was like, does that mean this is going to go in a residential area? So that, I don't know if that was addressed today, but that does still kind of stick out in my mind a bit, the floating zones. And I didn't know if you had any more information about that.
Well, it's a special exception that's only allowed in specific zones. So we
No,
limited.
that was the, like, real big ones. Like, we were trying to say, okay, well, 1 to 5, maybe a special exception, which is such a bad term nowadays.
I know.
People think we're making a special exception again, for someone, and that's actually just an old term from planning, meaning there's P permitted uses, and then there's these criteria that you have to meet in order to be approved, and we call those special exception. I wish it was a different term. Other towns call them special use permits.
Okay.
And maybe we should think about changing the name, because everybody always goes, why are you making a special exception for these people? And it's
Right.
not a special exception in that way. It's just the
Okay.
added layer of protection before a use can be granted.
Yes.
So we were saying, can we limit it from like 1 to 5 megawatt is special exception to the planning board, or 1 to 10 or something, or anything over 5 is town board. So now you have different, it's almost like a zone change, you know,
Yes.
and that goes to a new level. And where that threshold is remains to be seen.
You
But
still-
that's what, we
yeah.
said we would handle them like floating zones, but not, and put an energy like overlay, but you would have to be able to have a lot of acreage. You
Yes.
know, maybe it's a sand mine, maybe
Okay.
it's something like that, and you can come petition the town board and say, well, I have a 40-acre sand mine and there's no one around
No
me.
one around.
Can I do this here? But not those striped ones. We're just,
Okay.
those are gonna just be taken off.
And-
Okay.
And I asked for them as, you know, to come to the town board, because I feel like, you know, for the most part, these are all, you know, controversial uses. And I think, you know, as elected officials, and I think it's not fair to put that on the planning board, because people go to the planning board and then, you know, the residents show up and they're upset with the planning board, and the planning board is just there, you know, because it's an allowable use and they're just seeing it through a site plan. So for it to come to us, basically, you know, I think we should take the heat on some of this stuff. And we should hear from the community, because we are the ones zoning them. So, you know.
And then when you get to that higher level, let's say 10 megawatt, or it's 20, those, now you can, the town board can negotiate these community benefit agreements, which we should talk about in a subsequent meeting, and what that means, and what, you know, does being a host community mean? And
Yes.
what is that? And we need to lay that out with where these things can end up, with those
Right.
communities.
Okay.
So that's another added layer there that the town board would really be, because it's almost like a legislative act and conditioned upon on the benefit of the community getting something
Yeah.
out of it, more than just battery storage.
Yes. So, you know, obviously the canal site was, we argued about reasons why we felt it was inappropriate. But again, also, when we submitted a lot of things last summer, we submitted pictures of like massive flooding in that area. And we had a couple of storms where North Road was shut down. You know, code enforcement and police came to shut it down and make sure people were coming off the exit safely. So that area is, I don't know if any studies have been done there, but that is a major flood area and dangerous. And it goes right downstream, right into the canal, and actually it hits Lawrence Road, which is the streets across North Highway. It's called North Highway, but it's a 2-lane road, and all the runoff went down those roads as well. So that was a big concern as well for that site in particular. But I think what you guys are doing is great. We'll continue to watch and provide any feedback we might think is useful as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Do people sign up? I apologize. I
Did you want to- you
didn't
could
prior to. Is it,
Yeah.
is it all right? Do you have time?
Yeah,
I'm
sure. No, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. I'm Margaret Friedlander. Many of you know me, many of you may not. I'm really happy to see this task force in place. Really happy to see the results of what I consider the first person, me being the first person who turned the lights on or lit the fire, whatever analogy you want to use, which is kind of interesting based on the subject matter we're talking about. You know, back in 2022, when I was secretary of the Hampton Bays CAC, I brought this up as an agenda item. Unfortunately, it didn't make any traction. And then, as you know, I deep dived into hundreds of hours of research on this topic. And it wasn't Wikipedia. I mean, there were MIT articles, there were theses, there was everything. And as a result of that, I think had I not discovered this, and I have to give a little props to Geraldine Spinella, because she's actually the one who pointed it out to me. I just took it and ran with it. I think we would have had shovels in the ground. And so I want to thank the prior town board for putting a moratorium together, although some people it was pulling teeth, this current town board for the extension. And at the end of the day, you know, even though I said something, people didn't have to listen. And the fact that people really took it seriously and educated themselves, because I felt everybody who was speaking, there was always going to be a NIMBY thing or a bias, and people needed to educate themselves, not just listen to, you know, what I found out. And then I think ultimately, you know, that civic meeting where I made my presentation by invitation from the former president, Maria Holtz, you know, I made it very clear that I'm not against green adjacent technology. I explained what a BESS was, why it exists, the goals in terms of climate change, the Paris Agreement, et cetera, et cetera. But it's really about subject site location, and I think, I'm assuming most people that I've heard speak, I don't know about this evening, agree, and my sense is everybody's position is that. And I want to thank the planning board too, because from the beginning when we were still on Zoom and I was calling in to those sessions, Jackie LaFaro and the board were like super transparent, saying we're really uncomfortable, we don't know a lot, and we're being asked to weigh in, which is what you touched on just a little while ago. So I get it. And I think for me, I just read an article, I don't know if anybody else did, in the New York Times, and it was talking about, you know, climate change. And the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in 2018 reported on global warming drastically changing the way many of us feel about the climate crisis. So I get it. And we have to, you know, reach that 1.5 degrees Celsius, you know, target. You know, we have to do something, and I get it. But what I like to say is, and I wrote it down, the perils of certainty abound about grid-scale BESS. And for me, zoned in residential and environmentally sensitive areas is also very severely dangerous thinking. So I get we're all trying to achieve a goal. I think we're all trying to be as mindful as possible, but even the experts from the very beginning, no one ever says, you know, never. So I think, you know, also the safety evaluations are always inherently subjective based on, you know, factors of the evaluator's experience and their expertise, their tolerance of risk, things like that. So there's always going to be interpretation of related safety data. So I think most of us who understand climate change, there are several, especially in our upcoming election, who don't get it, but I think we do all get it. And I think for me, I'd like, and I don't know if you've already moved on from this, so apologies again for not being here earlier, but I'd like, you know, us to actually be able to move on and rescind the residential zoning for all the reasons, public safety, environmental situations, its proximity to people and the canal. And then I'd even like to ask the Canal Southampton BESS stakeholders to also, you know, let's move this along, and this can't be the only subject site location, and I know a lot of effort went into it, but I'm not going to go back and rehash all the reasons why, but, you know, there were uninformed people put in positions to make decisions based on certain information they were getting, and here we are. So I want to thank you guys in advance for putting this together. I think I provided my presentation to the prior board. I don't think it's of any use to you at this point, but if you want it, I'm happy to share it again. But thanks everybody who took the time to come here tonight, and thank you guys for listening.
Thanks, Margaret.
And we have the first thing we did was we took residential off the table, so.
Thanks for your research.
Shall we ask Kevin if someone is on Zoom? that would
Sure.
like to-
Yes, Kevin, is anyone on Zoom?
We have one hand raised.
All right, invite them in, please.
Hi, Phil.
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Okay, sure. So hi folks, I think I've met with some of you before, especially Giannis. My name is Phil Denara. I work for G-Capture Energy. We go by KCE. We're a utility scale battery energy storage developer. And to be forthcoming, we have a site under development within the town right now. So I just thought I'd pop on and provide maybe some initial comments. I apologize I cannot be there in person, but I do strive to be there in person over the next couple of meetings this summer. I am local to the area. I just unfortunately couldn't be there today. So I think the first thing I wanted to talk through is just, the scale of projects and the purpose. So I submitted some of this to Supervisor Moore and Janice this morning, and was hoping that they can share it with the rest of the group. I did submit some background comments, but in terms of the electric load and sizing of projects, we pulled electrical data at every single substation within the town to try to understand, the broad picture, what is the load profile of the town. There's an approximate load in the town of Southampton of about 100 megawatts, which can extend over a peak duration of about 10 hours. So if you think about the average size utility scale project, let's just point to like a 50 megawatt project, for example. Those are typically like 4-hour duration systems. So like a utility scale 50 megawatt project would have the capability to inject 200 megawatt hours onto the grid if it's fully charged. So that means like one fairly large scale 50 megawatt project within the town has the potential to, on a peak day, only serve about 20% of the peak load. So I did listen to the previous meeting minutes and recording, and I think Gary from LIPA noted the need for various distributed levels of projects throughout the town. I just want to note that I do think that some of these utility scale projects are really important. To the siting criteria, I'll note that I really appreciate the GIS analysis and technical analysis that has been done to date around ensuring that projects can be sited directly next to transmission or substations or transmission lines. To the questions around the feasibility of siting projects away from those lines, so potentially even opening up the criteria that already existed in this last query. I would say it's fairly difficult from a developer's perspective. You're talking about routing high voltage cables underground through rights of ways, through additional adjacent properties, whatever it may be. So I really do think that's important that, especially the bulk scale projects, are considered to be sited directly adjacent and abutting transmission and substation infrastructure that's there today. And then to that point, I know you all looked at that, the one initial kind of industrial zoning area that the transmission line runs through, I think is wrong. That's one transmission line. You typically can't site multiple projects on one transmission line. So if you're looking at only one transmission line being available for a project, that's also potentially an issue, because you really want distributed projects on multiple different circuits within the town to be able to support that. Otherwise, you're just putting it on one line and you're overloading the system. So I think it is really important that you're looking at a diversified approach to how projects are interconnected into the grid as you go through this process as well. And even like to Janice's point reliability of the grid. I think they'll have a hard time getting them to this type of meeting because it's not necessarily their forte. They are focused on grid reliability in markets, but good luck. But I think what they'll tell you is that even within siting projects next to a single high voltage line, like I've performed what's called thermal analyses of the entire electric grid and looked at like withdrawal and injection capabilities. So like even one single, like the industrial kind of aggregation of parcels that you showed with the single transmission line, like I've studied that specific transmission line, there's not that much capacity on it, right? So there's like, even within the high voltage system within the town, there's very specific lines that make the most sense for projects. So I do think it's important that again to consider opening up the criteria to allow for, you know, specific and distributed systems throughout the region. I have a lot of information around safety, and I do have opinions around buffers for sensitive receptors and such, but I think it might be healthier to have that discussion in person, so I will strive to be there in a future meeting, but I do urge you all to consider implementing setbacks from the project rather than the property line, because I think that will go a long way, and also allow you to look at a project on a project-specific basis in terms of the design criteria, what kind of mitigation plans do they have in place, et cetera. And then while I have the mic, I'll just jump in really quickly on a couple of things, especially with respect to project life. We are typically designing these utility scale systems to be approximately 20 years. And essentially how that looks is we'll present you a site plan and design on day one that shows the entire system after end of year 20. But the reality is some of those containers are going to be added throughout the project life. So we'll permit the full size of the project, and then essentially every couple of years to account for the degradation of the batteries, we'll add a couple of more containers and then rebalance the load across the site. So we're typically not swapping out container batteries unless they're like damaged and defected and need to be removed for warranty purposes and for safety purposes. But we are like adding containers on a frequent basis every 3 to 5 years to augment the system, but we permit that on day one and coordinate that type of additional augmentation plan on day one with the municipality. If and when batteries are removed, they are per law treated as hazardous materials, so they need to be wrapped and treated as hazardous materials and taken immediately to a recycling pen. So there would be essentially nothing stored on site on day one. So I know it's a lot, and unfortunately, I do not think the connection is always the best when you're virtual, so I do plan to be there in person, but if there's any questions that I can answer now, I'm happy to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
I think having an expert like this is a good thing. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, no, you can't talk to them because they're proposing something. But what I've found over my 20 years of planning is it's easier to just work with people than to shut them out and just say, well, what will work for you and what will work for the community, and come to some understanding and use that knowledge, because we don't want to not have an earth to live on. So we do need to do something, but we don't need to kill ourselves trying to do something that's going to hurt anybody. So I welcome Phil's input because he's an expert in this field, and I think it's a good thing that we have someone to field these questions to.
I appreciate that, Jen. So maybe, for an introduction to capture, we have 3 utility projects in the state, including the largest operational project. So 2 of our projects are 20 megawatts, and our last project is 3 megawatts. Our first 20 megawatt facility was built in 2019. It's in Saratoga County. It's a 1-hour duration project. So its primary job is to provide what's called frequency regulation on the grid. So it responds in very short charges and discharges to maintain frequency on the grid. Our second project that we built was a 3 megawatt, 4-hour duration facility, so slightly longer in duration. And it was contracted and built for Orange and Rockland Utilities, which falls under the Con Edison umbrella in Pomona in the Hudson Valley. So very sensitive receptors, a lot residentially dense, and the project's actually built next to a trailhead. So as part of building the project, we had to improve the trailhead and infrastructure so that folks that, if you go for a hike at this location, you could actually see our project, which is quite interesting. But Orange and Rockland had identified thermal overloads on the system and determined that was going to save the ratepayers tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars to site this project at the substation and essentially charge the project overnight and discharge it at peak load rather than transmitting and building new transmission lines that would have to bring that power in. So 3 megawatt facility, not that large in comparison to some of the projects that we're talking about, but still pretty substantial for the grid in terms of benefits to ratepayers. And then our last project is just south of Buffalo. It's a 20 megawatt facility as well. It's the largest in the state right now. With that said, I think New York is just beginning to scale up. So we have built 100 megawatt plus scale projects in other regions throughout the country, and we do expect that those type of scale of projects in New York are coming shortly as we kind of move towards this clean energy transition. So we've been operating 650 megawatts of projects successfully and safely. There's a lot to point to these systems being able to be operated safely, but it takes expertise, it takes the right team, it takes the right technology selection to make all this happen. And again, I do think it's really important that that's all a transparent process as we move through it. But yeah, thanks again for the time, and I look forward to talking to you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Phil, could you give us addresses of those projects so we could take a look at them from pictures?
Sure. What's the best way to correspond with it?
You want to just send them to Janice and she can forward them to us?
Yeah.
Sure.
And I'll send those other comments. Did we send them
We
to
received
everyone
them.
from him?
We received them, they haven't been logged in yet, but they will be just.
Yeah, we'll send all the
sent
comments.
out,
And then, yeah, myself or Seth will collect anything anyone sends and give them to everyone.
Could you
Thank you,
go
Phil.
up, Margaret, just so everybody can hear you, because otherwise they can't.
Hi, I'm Margaret Friedlander. So I like what I'm hearing in terms of assessing the technology specifically, because they're not all the same. And I understand some of the technical points you're mentioning. I also don't want to lose sight of understanding if you already have case studies where you've already decommissioned BESS and what your process is, and what's happened to these decommissioned batteries, because I think that's something everybody loses sight of. The NYSERDA guidelines that I read, I don't know how quickly they change or evolve or are amended. Obviously part of the proposal is the applicant has to be responsible for the decommissioning and put funds aside, et cetera, et cetera. There was also a key capture BESS that was initially being looked at on West Montauk Highway in Hampton Bays, and they didn't have a substation at that site location, so they were proposing building one by not selling the land to the electrical, I think it was LIPA, but deeding it. So there was this kind of workaround so that there was a substation there. And that was a question that I had based on that, which is, okay, what happens when this is decommissioned? So you have to understand the lifespan of these batteries. So I'd like to know if you have any case studies currently on what you did or participated in terms of decommissioning and what that was, and then make sure that we keep sight of that too in part of the planning, because that's a big part of it.
Thank you.
Look, Ian, it looks like you have something to say.
Address some of that today, or,
Just to, looks like our friend from NYSERDA was about to say something, but I think those questions were directed at you, Phil. I'm not sure who wants to respond first.
Well, if I had to hazard a guess, I might say that Phil and I might say similar things, which is to say, these technologies are so early in their deployment relative to project life that my guess, Phil, I don't know your portfolio of projects, but my guess is that you probably have not decommissioned the project yet. To my knowledge, there are very few large-scale projects that have been decommissioned. With that said, I do have access to a case study that was put together by the Electric Power Research Institute, EPRI, which is a nationally, if not globally recognized organization, assessing the decommissioning of, I believe, a 1 megawatt system, and I'd be happy to provide that to the committee.
Thank you.
I'm not surprised because it is.
Specific experience.
Yeah. I'm not surprised because it.
Color.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Margaret.
But to that point, I don't recall real specifics as to, like, when we're getting rid of hazardous waste, nuclear waste, there's a specific, you know, no matter where, like how it travels, where it goes, and where it ends up. That's the level of specificity I would like to know versus concept theory.
Phil, can you respond to that?
Yeah, one of the codes that you have to comply with building systems is associated with treatment of the batteries when they are removed. They are essentially classified as a certain hazardous material. I forget exactly what number it is, but Margaret, to your point about there being specific standards for hazardous materials being removed, it's essentially categorized as BESS as one of those hazardous materials, and then therefore you have to comply with those standards that already exist. So batteries are treated as hazardous material, but I think it's like one of the most stringent, if the most stringent classifications of a hazardous material. It needs to be treated as such when removed off site. So they will be packaged as hazardous material, put in trucks and freighted as hazardous material, and brought to the final recycling plant as hazardous material where they're ultimately treated and processed and recycled.
So, just to follow that real fast, I think because of the fact, and this is we were talking about possible, amendments to the code and changes that we'd like to see, amongst the people that are on the steering committee. And with regards to the decommissioning plan, one of the suggestions that, I know I had put forth was that, and I go back to what I said before, is that plan should have to be, in our code, we should work into it, that plan should have to be updated, not less than every 3 years, whatever it is. It's hard to even say that whatever would be proposed as a decommissioning plan today, I would struggle to say that should be acceptable until the project is, the site is actually hit the decommissioning point, because if it's a 20-year, 25-year, 30-year site, to think that the technology and the understanding of the technology and the understanding of what can be, could be, should be done with the products from that site is not changed, or our understanding of that has not changed in 30 years or even 20 years, or even, let's look at what we're dealing with right now. The recommendations in the code and the best practices and stuff like that, when this was considered, and the knowledge that's been gained in the 3 years, since when we started to see more projects develop throughout the country, is incredible. So to think that a decommissioning plan presented on day one should be representative of what the decommissioning plan is going to be on year 20 is crazy. So,
but also too, that's the other thing. I mean, this is to me a necessary evil, the way fossil fuels work, because the mining of this is not environmentally friendly. The decommissioning and disposal of hazardous material is not environmentally friendly. So, and it's also big business. Coming to town.
Yeah.
I get it. So this necessary evil, I think, ultimately, hopefully we're moving away from lithium-ion battery storage, and MIT's working on this. There's a lot of big think tanks working on this. So I agree with you. Everything will evolve, but you do have to start with some basics.
yeah.
Well, I have, I found this, the United States Environmental Protection Agency has guidance on lithium battery recycling regulatory status and frequently asked questions. So I'll distribute that to Janice, and she can send it to everybody.
I'll also just add in for reference that there are lithium-ion battery recycling facilities operating in New York today. The extent to which we're talking about this as a far-off future where that will transition. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't know the names of everybody on the committee here, but the gentleman was just speaking to the idea of what can change in a couple of years. There's tremendous innovation that's happening in the recycling space and moving towards a circular economy for solar panels, batteries, all of these technologies. So I do think that there is a lot of work going into greening up the process, if you will. I'll also just note that we, in our experience predominantly in solar, there's precedent for reevaluating decommissioning cost estimates and plans on a recurring basis. At the end of the day, part of the reason that you want to do that is because a dollar today is not the same thing as a dollar tomorrow. The impact of that money can change over time, so you want to account for, changes in inflation and project costs to begin with. We have at least in our model stormwater guidance, I forget if it's in our model storage law as well, recommendations for, periodic revisions to the cost updates or the cost estimates for decommissioning sureties. And I think a periodic revision of the recycling or of the decommissioning plan, I don't think is untenable, with the expectation that, it might not change that much from year to year, but over the course of the life of the system, there will be, things that our owner-operators learn as other systems that they have come offline.
I think that, the technology side of risk management is something that, you're taking a look at this point, and maybe this is something that doesn't have to be raised, but the cynic in me says, whose lapels are you going to get hold of when this thing doesn't work, and when you've got a recycling problem? Specifically, when we looked at the original proposals for Canal BESS, we traced this thing back through 6 LLCs before we found anybody who had more than 25 cents to their name. And, the whole idea of escrows and everything else, I'm sure New York has been down this lane many times, but just as a word of caution to make sure that that whole chain of responsibility is fairly well established, and the people who are making the assurances have got the wherewithal for escrow and for reinsurance and everything that's based on that.
Thank you.
Because my question to add to that was, what if the initial founding company is
Superfund.
That's the
Superfund.
point.
We covered this all before you came,
Okay,
Margaret.
thank you.
Yeah.
I'll go back and watch the recording.
There's federal laws, it's CERCLA, CERCLA, and it's Superfund, and that kicks in when something bad like that happens.
One of the gentlemen made a very good point in that he said, as the batteries get weaker, you have to expand them. You don't just take them out. The thing expands. And that's something that has to be considered. These things can get bigger to keep the same
He was saying
capacity.
it's considered up front, like it doesn't get any bigger than his original plan.
Well,
That's
He
what-
said he
that's-
permits it on day one, but they don't fill them up.
yeah.
They
okay.
do it
But-
over time, right, Phil?
But this is an interesting question. If you, in terms of the amount of stuff on site, I don't know if this is where he's going with this, but I'm going to jump in here. If the site is permitted as, say, a 20 megawatt site, and that would be, whatever, let's just say 3 containers. But as those containers lose efficiency or capability, in order to maintain a 20 megawatt total site capacity, you just start adding more containers. You're not necessarily taking away any of the 3 containers and swapping them out. Do you end up with, 20 years down the road, 20 containers on the site to achieve 20 megawatts versus the 3 containers that you originally started with? It might not be it might not be a perfect example, but if that's what you're talking about, that's a great question, because I hadn't thought of it until just now with we don't take away, we just add to it.
But he can't keep.
Well, I would
adding- he
ask
can't
Phil
keep
that
adding
question.
more
But
than
are
that.
you adding,
So
to
let's
achieve
ask Phil that
the same
question.
megawatts, or are you?
Let's
you know-
ask him.
Let's ask the question.
But the other thing I wanted to say was,
Hold on.
these guys have good information, but I really couldn't understand. Now, I do have one hearing aid, but I think the sound is not good enough. If you're going to have these guys providing important information, they need to be here. Doing this on Zoom
It's hard.
Yeah.
is not good, because I'm sure that I missed a lot of important points that were made. And so, again, Janice, you said it, that we need them here with us.
And it's crazy, because when you go back and you rewatch it, you'll hear them better than you'll hear
Yeah.
us.
Not necessarily.
Because when
No.
I was on Zoom, I could hear everybody on Zoom, but I couldn't hear the people in the
Well,
room.
in any event, my last thing is that we should have them here in person. And just thank you to all of you. I think you're doing a real good job, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Phil was gonna answer that. I
Yeah.
think Phil was
Yeah.
gonna provide some input on that.
Thank you. So let me just make sure it's clear that I'm talking about utility scale systems when I talk about augmentation of a certain scale, right? So all that is the grade at various levels, but I'm specifically talking about my experience as a utility scale developer and how we approach the design. But generally speaking, if I'm going to show you a site that has 100 containers on it, and that accounts for all augmentation across the project life, I'm probably building 90 plus of those on day one. So we're not talking about a substantial amount of the initial build on day one being added over time. It's a smaller percentage of the total build, but it is obviously crucial from an energy capacity. But like typically you can assume that like the system's going to generate on like a roughly 2%. It's not linear, depends how you use the system, but roughly 2% per year. So you have to essentially add the equivalent of that over life on an annual basis over the life of the project. But you do that every couple of years rather than.
But you're limited to your total amount on day one.
Yeah, we permit a project on day one, but I have some really great examples that I can bring in when I come, and it essentially shows,
Yeah.
it highlights like, of a 50 megawatt project, it highlights like the containers we're gonna build on day one in yellow, the containers we're gonna build at year 5 in purple, the containers we're gonna bring in at year 10 in green, kind of helps visualize the
Yeah, I think
implementation plan to account for.
I think that's really helpful for
Yeah.
us because it's been a visualization problem at this point because it's really, and it is helpful to hear from you on what the actual systems look like and.
Yeah, let me bring in some fun photos and we'll talk through it.
Okay.
But like back to the recycling and decommissioning stuff as well, just to really make sure Ian's point is clear. There is a circular economy here for batteries. Like recycling efficiency for these cells is like 90+%. So you're typically recapturing and reintroducing 90% or more of the lithium ion battery cell back into the supply chain. So as we look at domesticating manufacturing, finding just increased tariffs on cells coming from China by 4x. So as we look about domesticating supply chains, a key component of that is going to be recycling. And the great thing is that lithium ion recycling is one thing that is really feasible. And once it's in the United States and here to stay, because it is entering kind of a circular economy and local benefits. And then just to make sure it's clear on the design perspective, Margaret brought up a good point earlier about needing to build a lighter substation for anything that's connecting to a transmission line. So if you're not going directly into an existing lighter substation, so essentially you're siting it along a transmission line to account for buffers to sensitive receptors, which is what we did when we sited our project in the town. You have to essentially pull those lines into a new substation that you built for LIPA, and then you convey that substation to LIPA. We own and operate the actual battery storage project and the equipment that connects to that substation. You're essentially extending LIPA's grid to accommodate the project. So you have to like pull the line in, build up the breakers and infrastructure to ensure that power can flow past the project, and that you can kind of trip things off in different directions. But it is important to note that that is a component of the project when you are siting stuff along the transmission line versus directly to a substation. And we have some examples of that as well, but that's certainly important to keep in mind. It's something that we talked through with the planning board previously, because one of their major questions was, okay, like you guys build the battery storage project, but after you leave, does LIPA have its own discretion to do it if ever it wants it, but the site use it now owns somewhere in there as a public entity that's not necessarily within the jurisdiction of the town. So there would have to essentially be some kind of parameters to that around future uses on day one to protect against the town, but I think that's something that is certainly feasible and workable.
Yeah, if you guys review any of the sessions that talked about key capture and some of their pre-submission applications and the pre-submission conference for the site special exception.
You got to go to the microphone, please.
I'm sorry.
Please. Thank you.
I was just saying, if you reference back to some of the pre-application and the site plan special exception for key capture, and listen to that audio and some of the Zoom in terms of the planning for that, that that would give you a little bit of the conversation and the color that was around building that substation on that specific site and how they were planning on, you know, working with that and some of the issues that, you know, and questions that I had that came up. So it'd at least give you a little bit of color in a real world situation when it actually was in front of the planning board.
But I think talking through all this with, you know, Key Capture, NYSERDA, LIPA, ISO, New York ISO, whoever else is appropriate would help us. And what the planning board is really looking for is, like, where do these belong, and give us some more criteria. And they want to be sure that this is where everyone will accept it. And I think going through this as an iterative process, and I know that Key Capture looked at it and said, this is the best place we can come up with to be profitable, but that made, it does, you know, we looked at that just earlier and just quickly said, well, wait a minute, it's too close to this and that. So we, you know, I think through this process, just learning more about what is acceptable and where is going to be, you know, really.
Oh, I wasn't
On that we
weighing in
have
on
to-
good, bad, or the site location. I was specifically talking about the idea that they were actually working to create a substation.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, like that, a substation is more infrastructure, right? And just as these facilities are. So that siting of those substations or further siting of more substations is something I
With
think.
that, though, we have to kind of wrap it up.
I
because-
did want to recognize that our legislature,
Ann
Ann
Welker.
Welker is here, and
Ann, you should have sat up there with us.
And she couldn't be
You're
here
on
for
the
the whole
committee.
meeting, but, you know, she's very interested in what we're working on and will help in any way she can, I know that.
Welcome.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you. This ends at 6:30?
We have to be out of here in the next 10 minutes or so. because
Yeah,
there's
it
a
ends at 6:30.
ARB meeting. But I think we need to, I think honestly, I think we should set up our next meeting, but we should make sure that, you
So
know,
we'll work with Phil,
Phil can
and
come.
Ian, you're welcome to come,
Yeah,
or
Phil,
Bill
Ian.
can come back. I don't know where you guys are located, but we can work offline for the next.
To point, we, like Bill, would also have much rather have been there in person. It was not for lack of one who could be there, it's just a heads up notice. So if the next one is scheduled,
Let's
we'd
try
be
to
more than happy to make sure we're
coordinate
there.
with them better the next time.
Yeah, instead of picking a date, let's
Yeah.
coordinate so we can make sure that we can all be here.
Okay, so I just want to recognize Seth and all the hard work he's done to get here
Thank you, Seth.
today.
We know it.
Thank you.
A lot of
Thank you,
focus,
Seth.
a lot of
Really appreciate it.
understanding and reading, and we're also very interested in understanding, you know, in the planning department, what the right answer is. So thank you for all the work you've done to bring all the information to
Let's
us.
try to get something in the next 2-3 weeks, you know.
Sure.
Just so we can keep the momentum.
Absolutely.
Great, so we'll continue to have like the code, we're just sort of, we figure just as a briefly, that we would, each provision of the code will say like, committee recommendations, public recommendations, and industry recommendations, or NYSERDA recommendations, so everybody in like different colors. So you can kind of see the code provision and then say, well, the committee thought this, the public thought that, or concurs, and we just kind of, each one do this as an iterative thing until we land on the revision that, you know, if that makes sense. Just
Yeah,
wanna-
that makes
so-
sense.
Okay,
A lot of work.
good time. So,
Well,
great.
Seth has a lot of different colored Post-it notes over there, so.
I did. I was ready.
All right.
Fantastic.
Yeah, let's do it that way.
So we
All
won't
right.
pick a date then? We'll just leave it open for now?
I'd like to coordinate with them and
Yeah.
Okay.
get everybody in the
that
room
makes sense.
together and.
We'll send out emails and hope
All right, we'll
to
wait to
land on
hear
a
and,
date
yeah,
we can all, and then we'll put it out for the community so everybody knows when the next meeting is.
okay.
It kind of works well at this kind of time, like a Wednesday generally, you know, if we could just, because Tuesdays are town board and. so
Thursdays are work sessions.
Thursdays are work
Yeah, Wednesdays
sessions.
seem to
Nobody
work
really wants to
well.
do this on a Friday.
Mondays have worked too, though.
Mondays or Wednesdays, so it'll probably be a Monday or a Wednesday, so we'll
Yeah.
figure that.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Marion.
All right.
Thank you, Ian and Phil. Take care.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you.